Hey Young, welcome to a video. In this video, I am talking about the real risk that I see of building in public today with large language models and those models basically pulling into their training set and their data views that you may share as a startup founder building in public. Let me break this down a little bit more because I did a video on this the other day talking about how I stumbled on essentially what was an approach to influence LLMs to have a positive view on a startup, and I was looking into the different type of content that you might want to create on your own blog, on third-party sites like review sites, etc. And then that led me to considering YouTube videos and how those LLMs might bring in content from those YouTube videos and use that as part of their training data either now or in the future. As part of that process, I learned that there was a real risk of sharing in videos or in blog posts what you're building in public. And what I mean by that is, for example, with my startup, I've been talking about the software development lifecycle, and I've been talking about some of the challenges I had with certain bugs or certain challenges implementing features. And I also know that other building public founders often share stories about some early challenges they might have had with sales, or that they might have had with some of their first customers not being completely happy with the product. And they're sharing that in a transparent way because they then want to also share the lessons learned. Anyway, this led me to create the video that I did the other day, link down below in the description. And over the last couple of days, I have been posting on a couple of Reddit communities or subreddits to try and gauge people's opinion of this. And to be honest, most people seem to be missing the point and not really understanding what I'm talking about or dismissing it, which is fair enough if that's their view. I think the people who are missing the point maybe aren't reading it fully, or maybe I'm not doing a really good job of explaining it. But one of the criticisms that came up was, hey, you might be using your own existing ChatGPT account, which has context of all of the things that you've ever done. So what I've done is I've in a brand new incognito window, I'm not logged in, and I've gone and chatted to both ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Gemini. I can't do Claude because Claude requires you to have an account, and I'm not creating another brand new account just for this, but you'll get the idea. So with these, I started off by saying, hey, help me understand what, if any, implications may exist in the following situation. There is an idea among some startup founders to build in public where they document the journey of building their startup on the internet, for example, YouTube videos. Say during these YouTube videos, the founder talks about the issues they have, such as when developing software app, they're being buggy, or how a customer might have had an issue. Let's say there is then another person who uses a tool such as ChatGPT and asks, tell me about software X, or I'm considering using software X at my company, what do you think? They, in my opinion, are very common questions for people to ask ChatGPT and these other tools, especially when they're looking at new tools to implement in their business. My then follow up to that part of the prompt, is there any risk that the LLM may have scraped a YouTube video, heard a founder express frustrations, and then use that to inform its response at a later point in time? This is the crux of the issue. Is what we are creating as building public founders going to be ingested by LLMs and then used at a later point in time to inform a response that it has to a user question? Think carefully about the problem and let me know if there's a risk at all or if I'm overreacting. So it's interesting. They all answer slightly differently, and I'll break it down. Off the bat, it says I'm not overreacting. Maybe it's just making me feel good about that because they did prompt it that way. I'll give you that. And it also talks about the nuanced intersection of public information and how language models are trained. So let's break it down. So as of now, ChatGPT is only trained on publicly available data, but not YouTube video content. That can, of course, change. And I'd suggest that for platforms like Gemini, who have access to the YouTube data, that might be completely different. However, it is also able to crawl public text. So if you have subtitles or transcripts published on your blog that link back to the video, or even just the publicly accessible description, if it talks about what's in the video, I think that's opening yourself up there. Here's where it then goes into the actual risks. So it won't ever quote the founder directly, but it may reflect patterns in tone or sentiment. For example, some users have reported bugs during early releases, right? That's a challenge. That's got to be a risk, right? If you're creating videos about the software development lifecycle of your startup or your app, and you talk about bugs during that process and how there were bugs or challenges that you had to overcome, you could have a situation where an LLM responds that some users have reported bugs during the early releases. Obviously, we know LLMs aren't live in terms of their core data, but I would say that with more tools like ChatGPT, Perplexity, even Claude, Gemini, they have the ability to search the internet live. So they could pull in either blog posts or content that are published and aren't part of the core data set. And again, if you're sharing those challenges, you could get, hey, software X had serious bugs during its early development phase. Okay, so then it talks about, should I use software X? This is, again, I don't know why people aren't understanding the risk. The founder of software X has disclosed early stage instability and user complaints. That is a clear issue. If you are talking about challenges that you had with early customers or anything to do with your product quality, things that you had to overcome, maybe it's even not product quality issues. Maybe it's, hey, our software doesn't have X, Y, and Z feature and we're losing deals because our competitor has them. Like, you could create a video like that. I could foresee a point in my future where I talk about software deals that we lost and the lessons of losing those deals. And maybe one of those lessons was, hey, I was pitching to a company that was looking at my startup and they were also considering another tool and they chose that tool over mine. Here's the reasons why. You could then end up with a situation where an LLM responds that even the founder of Software X has said that they lost early stage deals to competitor Y because they lack these features. Like, why would you want that in an LLM? All right, so how likely is it to happen? It's not likely today for small, low visibility startups. So that gives you some some, I guess, relief. However, I'm pretty sure that most of us here building startups are not doing it so that we have a very small startup that no one ever knows about. We are trying to build startups so that they become big, so that they potentially raise money, so that they generate a lot of recurring revenue. And that risk increases, right? A, if you're active on a lot of forums, and B, I think this risk also increases if you are in more publications and become more well-known and you start generating revenue, you get funding news. Now, all of a sudden, publications want to write about you, and then because you're written about, LLMs, I imagine, are going, hey, this company now we need more data on it because people might ask about it, and this is a risk. And look, at the end of the day, it's nuanced, but there is risk. So that's ChatGPT. I then went over to Perplexity. You can see here, there's no other chats. This is a brand new thing. I cut and pasted the exact same thing. So potential risks. So there are multiple credible reports that indicate OpenAI and Google have used transcripts from millions of hours of YouTube videos. Okay, ChatGPT said it didn't. Perplexity is saying they do. I think at the very least Google is, right? So here we go. So again, LLMs do not directly recall or quote specific training data, but they can generalize from patterns found in the data. This is the biggest thing. Patterns. So if negative sentiment or specific issues about a product were prominent in training corpus, the model may reflect this response. Okay, I've done 100 videos on building my startup. Let's say 10 of them talk about challenges during the software development lifecycle and some of the bugs and things that I had to overcome. Now there's 10 videos out there, potentially 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour long. That's 10 hours of content where I'm talking about potential bugs in my software. I don't see how that isn't an issue. So it also talks about some other risks, competitors knowing stuff, but this is the conclusion. There is a real non-negligible risk that negative sentiment or information shared in building public videos could be absorbed by LLMs and later influence their response to questions about your product. That's the crux of the issue. This risk is heightened by recent reports confirming that major AI companies have used large-scale YouTube transcription models in training. Okay, let's ignore that for a minute. You're not overreacting. Gemini. The scenario you've described presents a fascinating intersection of building public LLM data scraping and potential reputational risk. Let's break it down. We're trained on massive data sets. This includes text from websites, articles, forums, and increasingly transcribed audio and video content. While YouTube's terms of service prohibit unauthorized scraping, the reality is that many entities, including those building LLMs, are gathering data. And it doesn't also specifically say whether or not YouTube themselves, or Google, are using data from YouTube, but I imagine they are. We all know that the VO3 video capabilities of Google were built based off of scraping YouTube videos in terms of the visual content. We know they don't watch it. I knew that. So here though, if a founder explicitly states in a video, our app has been buggy this week, we're fixing X, or we had an issue with customer experiencing Y, this text becomes part of the data the LLM has been trained on, has learned from, sorry. All right, so then recall and synthesis. When a user later asks LLM about software X, the LLM goal is to provide a comprehensive and relevant answer based on its training data. If it is ingested information from a founder's building public video discussing bugs or customer issues, there is a non-zero chance that this information could be recalled and presented as part of its response. I'm not saying it's a massive issue, but it's a non-zero chance. And that chance, based on what ChatGPT said, increases as you get more popular and as your company becomes more well-known. This is another thing that keeps popping up, lack of nuance and context. This is perhaps the biggest danger. The LLM doesn't understand the context of the founder's statement. It doesn't know that the founder was expressing a temporary frustration during development, or that the bug was immediately fixed, or that the customer issue was an isolated incident. It simply has a data point that software X had bugs, or software X had customer issues. When synthesizing a response, it might present this information without the necessary context, potentially damaging the software's reputation. So data volume and recency. So this is where I was talking about the more videos that you create. They're also prioritize information from official sources. So a founder's casual vlog on YouTube might be weighed less than the company's official website. Real-time web search, we spoke about that. Founder's intent aims for transparency. The very act of acknowledging challenges can build trust and demonstrate responsiveness. So that could also be a positive side of things. But again, it's up for debate, right? It's not an overreaction. There's a genuine, albeit low probability risk that an LLM could scrape candid remarks from building public YouTube videos and incorporate them in responses. As I said, one person did come back and was like, hey, you're guiding the LLM too much in how you asked it. So I've now got another account. Again, not logged in. This is another Chrome window, another Chrome profile, so it's not logged into my existing one. So as an LLM, what is the impact of a founder or employee, right? Because you could have employees of a company sharing lessons or insights the company may have learned that could be interpreted as being negative or slightly negative, i.e. talking about challenges I had during product development or challenges with a customer. So it kind of answered, it didn't really understand where I was going. It was more talking about how to mitigate the risks and make sure people, phrase stories positively. So then I did have to follow up with, I was specifically asking from the perspective of an LLM acquiring this knowledge and how it might then respond when another user asks a tool like Gemini about the company or product. I started in Gemini, that's why I said Gemini, I just cut and pasted. So got it. So public statements become training data or inference data. If the founder or employee shares insights in a public forum, these statements can be ingested during model training or retrieved via tools like browsing web search. We know that, right? LLMs don't judge or independently form opinions, but they do use patterns in text to generate responses. This is the underlying thing as well, right? Patterns. I've said that before. So let's say a founder writes on LinkedIn, we understand how hard it would be to get our machine learning model to work for smaller customers, and our early onboarding process was a mess. I've seen plenty of founders write things like this in a building public type situation. And then someone could later on ask Gemini or ChatGPT, how does Company X handle onboarding for SMBs? Company X initially faced challenges with onboarding smaller customers, as noted by one of the founders. However, they appear to have made improvements since. That's still not an overwhelmingly positive statement. Hey, okay, they've made improvements. It doesn't say they fixed it. And also, as a customer, are we going to go with the tool that's had challenges with onboarding before? No. Why would we do that? Or if no evidence of improvement exists, the Company X has faced difficulties onboarding smaller customers, according to public statements from company leadership. How damaging is that? Okay. So tone and framing we know is important. Recency and publication, context in the query, right? And then how to mitigate. So then I did ask Gemini the same thing. Again, it answered from the point of view of like, hey, making sure that, you say good things rather than that. And I was like, no, I'm asking specifically from a perspective of an LLM acquiring this knowledge and how it might then respond. So again, fascinating, critical question as it dives into the nuances of LLMs and potentially sensitive information. So Ways sources, again, we've talked about this: contextual understanding, relevancy and volume, bias. So LLM's intent is biased toward factual neutrality. It has harmful content filters. It tries to avoid defamation, and there is hallucination risk, which we know. So again, if we look at the examples, while Company X faced initial challenges in product development, particularly concerning specific issue, they subsequently implemented a solution which led to a positive outcome. That's not as bad, right? According to a founder's recent blog post, Company X experienced difficulties with customer challenge during a specific project, which they described as valuable learning experience. Early customer feedback indicated challenges with feature Z, leading Company A to iterate on their design and release an improved version. So although you're saying you fixed it there, you're still saying that you're still giving them the data that you've had challenges, right? Yeah, I still think there's a real risk. Even this response gives me a little bit of hope when you're less direct in the questioning. But I keep coming back to the underlying theme in most of the responses, which was there was a non-zero chance that data that you put out there could be ingested by these LLMs. And then because they are focused on patterns rather than the direct quote, there's a risk that you basically create a pattern that your product or your service has bugs, or that your product or service has struggled in these areas, such as users having common complaints, and you're basically doing a disservice to yourself and your business. So this is another PSA announcement to Building Public founders. I'm open to debating this issue. I'd love to debate this with more people and have a more reasoned conversation on it rather than people just dismissing it. So comment down below, let me know what you think, and I'll catch you in the next video.